Okay, hi friends, and welcome again. We're on the A Treatise on White Magic video commentary number 3, and I guess I should have put in here uh, this. Let's see, rules for the astral plane. Rules for the astral plane. There are 5 rules for the astral plane, and actually, he did the majority of his writing regarding these rules for the astral plane. There's even one chapter, excuse me, chapter 10, which is maybe 150 pages long, something of that nature. So we're going to really enter into this considering that a treatise on white magic is considered a treatise dedicated to help students control, manage their astral body, just the way the Dyna 2 book has a great deal to do with the initiation, preparation for initiation, a manual to understand initiation more completely. I think it's a more advanced book in some ways, but there are aspects of this book, of course, the Treatise on White Magic, which we cannot possibly touch. We can only look forward in the centuries ahead to Master D.K giving us what is required to unlock some of these rules and the secrets connected to these rules, when of course we can be trusted. That's the big issue, naturally. Okay, I'm just looking at my chronometer here, hoping it's going well enough, and just in case something happens to it, try to get the time at the beginning here. All right, so 21:15, good. Now, we've been dealing with the astral plane and what it is. And in DK's view, it's a plane of distortion, of illusion and glamour, and a distorted presentation of reality. It's also, he wants to help us understand that it is not star-like, although in a sense, the etheric body is filled with astral energy for the majority of people. So hence, this is why these terms are confused. The astral plane and the emotional plane, let's say, calling the emotional plane astral. It does descend to a great extent into the astral etheric body, star-like, radiant, and so forth. Its effect there is probably not wholesome, and when we overcome the veil of distortion, you know, what do we have there? The veil of impulsion, the veil of distortion, veil of separation, and the veil of aspiration, which is an interesting one. It's all about keenly desiring something, perhaps without really doing anything about it, doing anything useful. So first he gives us the terms for the astral plane and tells us that it is cloudy, misty, filled with miasmas and fogs, dense factors that prevent clarity, the interpenetration of colors, constant mobility of forms that make everything hard to distinguish. And then he says you cannot rely upon the astral plane when you want to understand reality. There's going to be a distortion of the presented reality. So just think about that term, distortion. It really, you know, in the simplest possible ways, it does not present the relative magnitude of things, the relative size. It makes things bigger or smaller than they should be. It exaggerates or minimizes. And think about your own state of consciousness of what Are you exaggerating the importance? In relation to what? Are you minimizing the importance? Can you see with that Libran perspective, which holds all things in right relationship? And if you can, it will indicate, I think, that there's some degree of necessary humility, because humility is, according to the Tibetan, an adjusted sense of right proportion. So when we get rid of the ego, lower ego, which tends to exaggerate or minimize according to its own desire nature and its basic desire to see itself as important, maybe is the most important thing in the world. When we get rid of that and substitute for it humility, we will have a true sense of right proportion, and we will be able to see the truth as it is rather than exaggerating or minimizing. Of course, we've been doing it so long that it's very hard to detect. Now he goes on and talks about battling on the astral plane. The Scorpio is so connected with the astral plane, and it is deeply connected with the second initiation, where we overcome many, maybe the majority of the usual kinds of glamours that are there to be found, our own types, which we have to detect and which Master D.K helped his students see. We don't have him writing personal letters to us right now, but he will be emerging. He will be teaching, and he is to be listened to. And, maybe if we work hard, we'll come into association with him and be able to be trained to be even more useful to the divine plan. The astral plane is also the Kurukshetra, both of humanity as a whole and the individual human unit. Apparently there was a battle in ancient Atlantean India, or whatever is now called India. Hard to know what it was called then. There's a plane, I've been told maybe some 20 miles south of Delhi, where this great battle took place. And there's a possibility that advanced weaponry was used in this battle. The Atlanteans had access to weapons that we have not even conceived yet. Something about the melted glass in the area, or glass-like remains showing very high-powered, high-energy, high-temperature weaponry. Anyway, it has come down to mean the battle between good and evil within the individual and within humanity, between the elemental aspect and the solar aspect, or between the moon and the sun. And Arjuna is the hero of that battle, and each one of us is Arjuna, if we could but realize it and make the proper choice. It is a battleground whereon must be found the Waterloo of every aspirant. Napoleon was defeated at Waterloo, and the defeat of the personality is key here, the defeat of the personality. And eventually, the ending of the what he calls ancient authority of the personality. There are some types of freedom. I've pointed this out before, but it really bears repetition. All I have to do is find it. There it is, maybe, and it's going to be in the rays and initiations, and it's going to say something like freedom, ancient authority. And if you look at this page 686, it gives you every initiation. in terms of the kind of freedom that you achieve. So we are largely talking about the second initiation now, because the astral body has ruled humanity for a long time, but eventually the whole personality will subside and the soul in incarnation will have freedom from the ancient authority of the threefold personality. I find this tabulation to be really amazing, and when you go higher, you kind of wonder how you can even understand these things. What is freedom from the reactions of consciousness, at least as that word is usually understood? But these are things ahead of the great individuals such as the Christ and the Buddha. So we have the words, but no way of really understanding what they will encounter. Veil after veil has to be lifted, and the amazing thing is we don't really see the veils through which we are looking. And that means that, as far as we're concerned, they're not really there. And yet, after they've been lifted, you ask yourself, what was blocking my vision? Why could I not see what now I do see? And the answer has to be a kind of a veil. I don't know what to call it. Is it transparent? In what way does it distort? In what way does it limit? We are certainly, all of us, the victims of very limited consciousness. Didn't he just tell us that the brain manages to reverse the appearance of things, especially in relation to the astral plane, and combine astral energy with brain tendency, and you get an inversion of understanding. And with it, I suppose, an inversion of desire. And wrong desire takes the place of right desire. And we begin to pursue the things of the phenomenal world. You know, this kind of inversion emphasizes the importance of what is material. And we do not strive after the realities. Well, we have the teacher here to remind us that we see through a veil. We have St. Paul, now Master Hilarion, telling us that we have been seeing through a glass darkly, but later we shall see face to face. So, you know, it's difficult when one is within one's own limitations of consciousness to know what those limitations are. It's afterwards, when one can compare the new state with the remembered old state, one realizes how blind one has really been. And then, you know, there is that freedom from blindness at the fifth initiation, a liberation which enables the initiate to see a new vision. This vision concerns the reality lying beyond any hitherto sensed or known, and basically the 7 or 9 paths on the way of higher evolution are revealed. And then much consideration has to be given to them so that when the 6th initiation comes, at least that's how it is now, the one correct path for each outward bound monad has to be chosen. So the Waterloo of every aspirant, not the Waterloo of our soul, okay? You know, not the Waterloo of our soul, but a kind of triumph of our soul. In some one life there comes an emotional crisis in which decisive action is taken, maybe not just sort of drifting into the decision as many of us have done, and the disciple proves his control of his emotional nature. The thing about Scorpio demands proof on the physical plane. and it cannot remain simply theoretical. Okay, this may take the form of some great vital test covering a brief time, but calling forth every resource of wisdom and of purity that the disciple possesses, more the, let's say, more the first ray approach, because first ray gets on with it in terms of time, and there are immediate impelling crises as one goes crashing through, as he describes, into the next area of possibility. And but the second ray, first ray methods of detaching can be drastic. Second ray methods take longer. And generally, we'll take a look at the hardline rays, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 2, 4, 6, each of them characterized by a different approach. One is more executive, the 1, 3, 5, 7, and maybe the other more psychological and sensitive, the 2, 4, 6 line. In some one life, there comes an emotional crisis in which decisive action is taken, and the disciple proves his control of his emotional nature. Can you say you've had that? Think back on your crises. Have you proven your control of the emotional nature? Highly emotional moments, perhaps, and maybe the desire nature wanted to go in one direction, but the feeling or the sense of what is right led in another direction, and then from a position of the soul-infused mind, or at least the clear mind, you made the choice to go in the right direction rather than the attractive direction, which may have led into much error and grief in the long run. So it's a brief time, or it may be a long and protracted emotional strain carried on over many years of living. Maybe some people, in a bad marriage, as they joke, the psychologists joke about this, to say this person has decided to die in the marriage. Okay, I'm just hoping that when I get that kind of signal, my computer is protesting. But in the attaining of success, and in the achievement of clear vision and right discernment through right discrimination, see vision, the sense of sight, the number 5, the fifth ray, all of these go together. And right discernment, well, the fourth ray is involved with that, and the third subplane of the higher mental plane is involved with spiritual discernment, but there's also simply psychological discernment as well. Okay, well, did I say it properly? A call came in, I'm sorry. It happens. But they say, oh, the person is going to die in the marriage, which means just stay in that emotional strain, or perhaps somehow work it out over time and pay the karma. But it's more of the second ray approach, 2, 4, 6, to remain attached and work things out until there's a proper balance. But anyway, clear vision, right discernment, all of this, the fifth ray, and discernment on the third subplane, spiritual discernment, and I think I was going to say ordinary psychological discernment, which can be of value. All of this testifies to his fitness for the third initiation. Okay, or not third, but second initiation, sorry. All right. So I'm doing my best here to deal with my recalcitrant computer and hoping that it doesn't erase anything that I really need. One just has to go forward despite technological obstacles. Alrighty. So there's a battle. We all have been through the battle. It's been a long one. And that battle will continue. There's a great battle. Well, you know, the whole second initiation is about battle, and there's a big, fearful conflict before the third degree. And you can imagine the great choices of sacrifice at the fourth degree. And maybe the revelation for the fifth degree does not involve so much of a battle. The sixth degree involves great choice. Is it a battle? Well, it's probably not conducted on the emotional level. It has to do with much higher type of discernment. As far as other and higher battles, well, we only know that such beings as the planetary logos are struggling on the cosmic astral plane. And we sometimes look at the deep universe and see galaxies colliding, apparently, and fragmenting. And we can only imagine what's going on there in terms of the entities who are expressing through such vast structures with even trillions of solar logoi incorporated in them. You know, we're just, as DK tells us, we are microscopic man. And the very fact that, you know, when you walk down the street, it's man you're interested in, basically, and the creations and works of man show us how obsessed our consciousness is with that which is really tiny in the great scheme of things. But we will develop the right sense of perspective as we proceed. I would like to point out, he says, that it is this test and crisis through which humanity is now passing. It doesn't mean, you know, okay, so not the second degree for all, but we are passing through tests and crises which precede the first initiation of the requisite number of human beings. And when you have first-rate planets like Pluto and Vulcan involved, as we do before the first initiation, it's going to be a battle. Okay, but it's this test and crisis through which humanity is now passing, and which began in those conditions which culminated in the World War and the present world strain. And you realize when he talks about the World War, he says generally 1914 to 1945, and you kind of wonder, are we out of it yet? Is there a third world war which we have finally or will finally learn how to fight out in a psychological and mental manner and not let it precipitate onto the cosmic, onto the physical plane? The first initiation of humanity as an entity is important because it's a major one, took place when individualization became possible and the soul was born in the body of humanity. Now, we can ask ourselves, was this the first cosmic initiation for the planetary logos? Or was it simply the first initiation in a series of 7? And see A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. Oh, no one is going to understand that. TCF page 384. So this, anyway, the first initiation of humanity, it may have involved, as is said, the opening of the planetary heart. Individualization on this planet involved the coming of the solar angels, and they are hearts of fiery love and much identified with the buddhic consciousness and their rays, sort of generic second ray of love, wisdom, and fifth ray of luminous mind. So, what was that initiation? I think there's a way to find out. I'm not going to go looking for that right now, but it was really significant in the life of the planetary logos. Now, this was preceded by a period of fearful stress and strain, dimly sensed by the pioneers into the human kingdom from the ranks of animal men. Fascinating. And, there's a big analogy there long ago that without really knowing what they were getting into, there was this, they could feel fear, of course, and the stress and strain which preceded the coming of the solar angels. And sometimes we're told that so many of those forms of animal men were destroyed in the firestorms of the period, which coincided with the coming in of the solar angels, or at least the implantation of the spark of mind around the mental unit, which had been growing up for a long time of animal experience. So there is the analogy back 18 million years ago, 18.5 million years ago, of our entry now into a new kingdom. At that time, and it's taken now millions of years to reach this point, humanity was entering a new kingdom. Can you call it humanity? It was animal man of the period. There was intelligence, but there was not self-consciousness. And that I-ness capacity was implanted within the mind and brain of the animal man of the period. And after 3 million years, it took a long time, this being began to really come into itself and realize that it was distinct and had been, well, they didn't know the details, but was a separate being, apparently separate being. So now we have something similar as we move into the fifth kingdom of nature. Should this present crisis, this first initiation of humanity with, well, we don't know the proportion, but a certain proportion of humanity necessarily being passed into the fifth kingdom, should this crisis be successfully passed, the second initiation of humanity will be the result of passing through the baptism and entering the stream. Now that's interesting because he's looking at initiation in a different way. The first was individualization, and we're not talking about the birth of the Christ in the heart. Those are the monastic initiations. And maybe in this sequence of initiations that he's describing that involve the entirety of humanity, there is a kind of baptism imminent, a kind of baptism into the fifth kingdom of nature, imminent. So, baptism by fire. I mean, as individuals, we go through this with more fire now accentuated than the waters of grief and loss. The Pentecost for the disciples in the upper chamber, that was an example, maybe kind of an initiatory example of what baptism by fire could look like. In a way, the whole group was taking a kind of second initiation. So the world war and its resulting effects constitute the Kurukshetra of the world Arjuna, and the outcome is still in the balance because on the inner planes, the world war is not over. There's always three phases to something, and let's just hope that we manage to make this third phase constructive instead of destructive in such a way that the whole experiment, as we've been warned, might have to be started again and see if a race of humanity couldn't be raised up that actually fit with the divine plan. And that would be terrible, and the loss of millions of years. So anyway, the World War and its effects constitute the Kurukshetra of the soul of, the Arjuna, the incarnated soul of humanity in this case. And we are all Arjuna as well. We are also Arjuna individually. The outcome is still in the balance. Let this not be forgotten. There is, however, no cause for pessimism. The outcome of good is inevitable. And remember, this is cosmic fire. And not cosmic fire, but white magic. It was written in the 30s. The war had gone underground. And was it going to emerge again? It did. It did on the physical plane. It was precipitated on the physical plane, which was both very bad and very good eventually, because a lot of things were really cleared. And Shambhala was able to wipe the slate mostly clean, although we're still involved in this war, it seems to me, working on a psychological level. There is, however, no cause for pessimism. The outcome of good is inevitable. It is, however, a question of slow or a rapid realization and liberation from the great world illusion. And to this, every aspirant is begged, and this, from a master who is not given to overstatement, begged to work strenuously and to lend his aid. So this book was written in the late 20s and early 30s. So we have to keep that in context and realize the war did precipitate. There was a hope that a great movement of goodwill could offset the physical precipitation of this war, but it did not. And upon the shoulders of the disciples, some of the blame was laid. There just weren't enough to be powerful enough to offset this. Not enough cared, I guess. Every man who liberates himself, who sees clearly, and who releases himself from the glamour of illusion, aids the great work. So, in this particular case, let's just say that individual work helps the achievement of success in the world work. So if you say, well, we're just working on ourselves, but in fact, an improvement of the condition of our energy system has the effect in our environment and so forth, and if enough disciples really make that improvement, then the larger picture is affected, and it would be a kind of illusion to imagine that we did not count simply because we are so small. Tuya tells us about, it's a very touching story about a forest fire, and all the animals were just looking on and they didn't do anything, They were losing everything, and this little bird just dipped down and got a drop and then released that drop over the forest fire, came back, got another drop, and so forth, so forth. And they laughed at the little bird, who replied, well, at least I did my part. So you can imagine if we all do our part, carry our drop to the raging fire, carry whatever water we can to the raging fire, we might succeed. Matter of fact, if we do that, we will succeed. So never let it be said that the individual is insignificant. One person thinking truth, we are told, can change the entire environment. I wonder if I can find that. It's such Such a great, no, that's not it. Such a great statement. Let's see if I can find it here. Thinking truth. Ho ho ho. Well, oh, that's tinking. Let's see if I can do it better. Now let's see what it says here. Well, thinking truth, thinking truth. Maybe it's put some different, a little differently, but certain disciples, usually unrecognized in the world at large, who are thinking truth. Let me call your attention to that phrase. And basically, he's saying that these people are important. And there is a reference, I don't know if the gerund is used, thinking truth, or thinking, I think it's something like that, where they affect their entire environment. So, and just imagine, it's not just speaking truth, it is thinking truth. So we are very responsible for the kind of thoughts that we entertain, whether or not we actually utter them as words. Okay, my computer is fighting me here, but I'll do my best to go on and get this up on YouTube for you. Again, now this is number 4. This is number 4. So we've had before the definition, and we've had distortion. We have had the battle, Kurukshetra. Sorry. Yeah, we've had the battle. And now, interaction of the pairs of opposites. So, going on then. Again, the astral plane is that whereon the pairs of opposites act and interact, and whereon the pull of the great dualities is most potently felt. Remember, the vertical pairs of opposites are very important. And even with Libra, you know, the light that moves to rest, something of that nature, it's a vertical situation. The soul is pulling up, the form is pulling down. There are other pairs of opposites where the good and bad are not the issue. It's just horizontal, and neither is good nor bad. They're simply opposites. But when it comes to the vertical pairs of opposites, then we have perhaps the good that should have been outlived down here, and we have the impending good. Primarily, the interactions between the soul and its vehicle matter, but there are many lesser dualities which play their part and are easily recognized by the average man. Well, light and darkness interact. We cannot say necessarily that one is better, because there is a great darkness that descends in pralaya, and it is most necessary, and the universe comes to light, and then later again the darkness supervenes. Pleasure and pain interact. We usually say that pleasure is desirable and pain is undesirable, but pain may be the awakener, right? So pain may be the awakener. Good and evil, of course, are vertical pairs of opposites. And good and evil meet and form the playground of the gods. And that's interesting. The masters regard time and space as their playthings. Oh, goodness. Not typing very well there. But they reach a point where they are no longer embroiled in time and space, and they can manipulate time and space according to their understanding of the plan that must precipitate in time and space. Poverty and riches are offset against each other. You know, the poor you always have with you, said Jesus, and but me you have only for a little while. Well, who's to say? Riches can put chains on the wretched soul, Master Moria seems to suggest, and poverty may be just that environment in which challenges the individual and makes it possible for inner abilities to emerge. So there we cannot say that one is better than the other. Excuse me, but that one is certainly more desirable than the other, although vows of poverty have been taken by certain orders of monks or nuns, and with the idea that, you know, in the Piscean age, somehow poverty was good and that money was evil. So, you know, it's difficult to just make a hard and fast judgment. Obviously, the Christ looked on at humanity and said, poor ones. He realized all that human beings did not have, and he wanted to endow them with a life more abundant. In this case, the riches were spiritual riches and desirable from the spiritual perspective. And poverty was the lack of those spiritual riches and not desirable. But from another perspective, when we consider the ordinary view of riches and poverty, poverty may be more productive of the growth of ability than riches. And we've seen that, I think, many times when people, you know, who have everything done for them do not benefit at all. But when poverty or lack or some sort of hardship forces them to find within themselves the solution, then they improve. And Master Moria says obstacles are possibilities. So we're talking the realm of Saturn here, which may deny the presence of some good in order to create a greater good. The entire modern economic situation is of an astral nature. I guess we can say because people desire the love of money, you know, they desire what will fulfill their lower inclinations. People desire money for the fulfillment of their desires in the world. Now, you know, there have been some very, very wealthy philanthropists who have helped tremendously, and Master Rákóczi, as the Count of Saint-Germain, was fabulously rich. Word reached the court how rich he was. Nobody knew who he was. The miracle man, you know. Voltaire, the man who knows everything and never dies. Voltaire said something like that about him. He would present at his fabulous dinners a beautiful jewel at each place setting. Trouble is, it was kind of an aport, and it disappeared later when the guests took it home. So the entire modern economic situation is of an astral nature. It is the outcome of desire and the result of a certain selfish use of the forces of matter. Hopefully, this has dwindled since Atlantean days, when it was totally out of control, the Master tells us. Heat and cold, as we understand the term, in a most peculiar manner, are the result of the interplay of the pairs of opposites. has to do, I suppose, with interplay producing frequency, or let's say atomic frequency, or atomic or molecular frequency. And an interesting line of occult study concerns itself with the effects of racial emotions. Oh, these are amazing hints on climate conditions. Well, we have great hurricanes these days: dryness, drought, floods, the imbalance of the elements, and apparently our emotional conditions, if they were stabilized and rendered harmonious, some of these dreadful moments in nature would be relieved. We most truly make our climate in one significant sense. When desire has burnt itself out, planetary life comes to an end, as climatic conditions will negate form life as we understand it. Well, just want to say we know there are beings on Venus, but look at how inhospitable Venus is to life in form as we know it. And, that's the same. Maybe Mars, an unsacred planet, is less inhospitable, but more spiritually inhospitable. Venus is very spiritually hospitable, and I suppose the lives there are not so much acting out on the dense physical plane, but we could never, our particular vehicles, could never survive the outer Venusian condition, nor the Jupiterian, nor the Neptunian, nor the Saturnian. Maybe there are other forms that can survive that. But this is very interesting that our astral body, goodness, I'm almost losing hope here. It's not so, I'm having trouble saving, am I not? Yes, I seem to be having trouble saving. So, when, our desires keep us alive in form, and the end of a desire for phenomenal living will bring on climatic conditions which will negate form life, but with the caveat as we understand it. Because there's all kinds of form life, and anything that's operating on the cosmic physical plane is, from the cosmic perspective, form life, even our very highest planes. In relation to the human unit, the secret of liberation lies in the balancing of forces and the equilibrizing of the pairs of opposites. So Master D.K. tells us that Libra is growing stronger in the planetary horoscope. You kind of wonder why that is. Is it because of the age of Aquarius, in which Libra is one of the decanate rulers, we might say? First Aquarius, then Aquarius Gemini, then Aquarius Libra, with its ruler Venus bringing in the age of brotherhood later, when only 720 years remain in the equinoctial lesser Aquarian age. But so far, the forces on our planet are not in balance. The forces in humanity are just obviously not in balance. And maybe if we study ourselves very carefully, we will see that forces in our own life, our own energy system, present certain imbalances which prevent the attainment of the kind of spiritual contact, a spiritual influence we might otherwise experience. The path is the narrow line between these pairs, spirit and matter, I suppose, which the aspirant finds and treads, turning neither to the right nor to the left. Now, this can involve soul and personality, or spirit and matter. There are many of these opposites. If we turn too far to the left, we are buried in form. If too far to the right, we become so intense that we destroy the form. So there's an old saying, I think it's in the Bible somewhere, and it says, do not be righteous. Even the word shows a rightward turn, right? Do not be righteous overmuch. Why shouldst thou die? It's very, very interesting, isn't it? Do not be righteous overmuch. Why shouldst thou die? So let's just, for fun, do not be righteous overmuch. And what's it from? Ecclesiastes 7:16. These are King Solomon's words. He was the earlier incarnation of the Master Moria. Do not be or be not righteous overmuch. Why shouldst thou die? It just tells us that we have to respect the form. We have to respect the form. Now, I'm just going to take a quick look here, and it's my real hope that that the timing is right on this. 2209, 2209. Okay, I may have solved the problem. Right. So if this is 2209, it's going to be number 10. Okay. Sorry for this little bit of housekeeping there, but it is problematic when your computer is challenging you. It must be remembered always that when the pairs of opposites are discerned, there's a lot of confusion in the field of perception, but you notice something. Noticed. Discernment is noticing. Often something that is not obvious. When the pairs of opposites are discerned, or let's just say picked out from the general movement or chaos, when a man balances the forces in his own nature, when he has found the path and become the path, and I would say how, but through the building of the Antikarana, then he can work with the world of forces, can preserve the balance and the equilibrium of the energies of the three worlds, and so become a co-worker of the masters of wisdom, not yet a master himself, okay, but at least a disciple and an initiate. So let us pray and hope that this may be the practical outcome of our understanding of the nature of the battleground of the astral plane. I tread the way. It's a Libra thing, I tread the way which leads between the two great lines of force. Sometimes, well, it's usually the soul between spirit It's the way of consciousness between spirit and matter, but sometimes the Sushumna is considered spirit with soul on one side and matter on the other, and then it's a different way because a different way of considering because spirit somehow includes both consciousness and matter. And so there's a kind of identification with both, and maybe that's one way of considering treading the noble middle path. It's not always perhaps the way of soul. It's certainly in the next solar system, which is going to be given very much to the will, probably with the first ray personality of our solar logos. Maybe the middle path will be very much the path of spirit. I mean, DK hints at what it will be like, and will we be here, and in what form will we be here? It's trillions of years ahead. But some are going to Sirius for training in the art of becoming a solar angel, and this particular solar system is about half completed, so it means we're approximately 150, 155 trillion years into a 311 trillion year solar system if the Brahmic chronology is correct. So these are vast spans, but when you compare them against eternity, they're just a blip, the vastest or most vast definite span of time that you can possibly conceive, if it is definite, is compared with eternal duration, an absolute infinitesimal of time. Maybe it doesn't even exist. Well, there are some, real deep philosophical questions here that we have to go into under a different ray. And I hope to do that, in my book that is in the process of being written a long time, the Seeds of the Infinite. Seeds of the Infinite. I've already written a book on infinitization. I've revised some of my thoughts, but then, one will have to because you're dealing with a subject which is so stupendous that, you can't trust your own thinking to really reveal the truth. You can just ascend through lessening illusions. So I have no doubt that whatever writing I can produce will be filled with illusion. But then again, since we don't get rid of illusion until the 9th initiation, at one point, Master D.K tells us that I guess we have to leave the cosmic physical plane altogether. And even then, okay, it's a relative term, but at least illusion as we now experience it will disappear after the 9th initiation. Then all of us are just ascending and deepening through lessening illusions. And the lessening of an illusion appears as the truth when compared to a denser type of illusion in which we had been with which we had been engaging our consciousness. So this is going to be the end of a treatise on white magic video commentary number 3. And our date, and as rules for the astral plane, it should be rules of magic for the astral plane. And the day is the 10th of June. And I think, maybe if I can do that, I'm not sure that anything here is going to give me exactly what I need. Maybe not. So I'm not going to worry about putting in a new word. I'll do that later. And here we have the beginning of a treatise on white magic video commentary number 4, rules for the astral plane, and whatever day on which that will occur. We're just about to begin a new section, and more or less we are at the 1 hour point. Well, it's it's good to study together, to think clearly, sentence by sentence, almost word for word, what the Master D.K. has written. He tells us, read more carefully what I have written, and the attempt here, although it's bound to fail, of course, but is to read more carefully and with greater consideration what he really wrote rather than just sort of skipping over it. Um, there is so much to be extracted, and as I've said before, the book is written on many different levels. There's the words, but then when you start putting them together in certain ways, there's another layer. Put them together in still more advanced ways, there's another layer. And revelation keeps on ascending. So it's what we do with what is written that is also included within the content of the book. And the light that may be visible on first reading is not the maximum amount of light that can be extracted from a book like this. We have to make all kinds of comparisons and relationships and juxtapositions, and then more and more and more light will appear. So every book is a bit like a pyramid, The writing of it is like the base of the pyramid. But as we start combining and recombining in different ways, the amount of light intensifies until we reach the capstone, the epitome of possibility. Alrighty then. We'll go on to number 4, when it becomes possible. Thank you for your participation, and study hard and deeply, and reflectively, and carefully, and with humility, realizing that our studies will advance us, but they will not give the final word on the truth of the matter. So we just have to realize that. That's all. Okay, let's see you soon. Bye-bye.